Okay, hello. My name's Jeff McAuley, and I would like to welcome you to my Composition Online 6-minute webinar. Today we're going to be talking about species counterpoint. You'll see I have a picture of myself up there. I look very different. That was pre-quarantine. This is my post-quarantine look. I've given the haircut to myself, as I'm sure many of us had to do over the last some months. I'm going to be talking about species counterpoint, and I really think this is a neglected training method for composers, in music schools across the nation as well as globally, for that matter. I mean, counterpoint really goes hand in hand with harmony and theory and voice leading, that sort of thing. Now, another name for species counterpoint is Palestrinian counterpoint. It was named after the prominent Renaissance composer Giovanni Pierluigi da Palestrina. Now, I love Italian very much, but I love that name even more. That's a $5 name. He was a composer of the Renaissance, as I said, which was a period of music that preceded the Baroque period in music. And the music of the late Baroque was really the height of complex polyphony in music and complex contrapuntal writing, especially if we look at the music of Johann Sebastian Bach. Now, during Bach's time in the Baroque period, they used major and minor tonality in Western music. So the music was governed by the major scales and minor scales. Now, major and minor scales are also found in church modes. Now, these are the scales of the Renaissance. The church modes, I say they used ancient or church modes, giving the music an otherworldly feel, right? Now, the church modes are the white notes on the piano. So, for example, if we start on D, that's Dorian, then E Phrygian, Lydian, Mixolydian, Aeolian on A, which is actually synonymous with the natural minor scale, Locrian, and then finally Ionian on C, and Ionian is synonymous with the major scale. So I say they sound a little bit different because the scales are constructed slightly different than major and minor scales would be. For example, Dorian is like a D minor scale, but with a raised sixth. So instead of the B flat, we have B natural, okay? Now, these are the scales that Palestrina was using in his music. And it's also based on a fixed melodic line, or in Latin, cantus firmus. So Palestrina was writing, sacred, polyphonic, sacred music, right? Sometimes 4 voices, 5, 6, up to 8 voices, right? And they were always based on a cantus firmus, which was one fixed melodic line. Now, this could be anywhere. It was often put in the bass, but it could be put in the tenor part or the alto or the soprano. But this was the melody that was going to be used to write against, right? All the other contrapuntal lines. Now, in species counterpoint, it follows a strict set of rules. Now, I'm not a huge fan of rules myself, but as an adult, I found they're necessary, and especially during pandemic, we had a lot of rules to follow. As a composer, studying this ancient music and putting myself in this box with this rigid set of rules, I found incredibly beneficial, because later on down the road, as when I'm writing my own music, and I love contrapuntal music, I love polyphony, a lot of my own music is based upon polyphony, that I'm able to have these rules in the back of my head, so to speak. So I can use them, I can reference them, I can throw them away, or I can break them. And sometimes that's the most beautiful thing, is you breaking the rules when you know you're breaking something, and you do it for a specific reason. So I usually will say I'm breaking this rule for the sake of expression, or the sake of being an artist, right? So we're going to talk about the rules and how this works. Music is primarily consonant with this Palestrinian counterpoint. Dissonance is handled with great care. So we'll see that when we introduce dissonance, it's not only moving towards dissonance, approaching dissonance, but also resolving dissonance. So going towards dissonance and moving away, it has to be handled with great care. I mean, oftentimes a dissonance, for example, on an offbeat would be on a 7th, would resolve down by step to a 6th. Now, students will learn, in my classes, students will learn the pros and cons of parallel, contrary, and oblique melodic motion. Now, parallel motion is what it sounds. It's when 2 lines or more lines are moving together in one direction. So if you have the cantus firmus, for example, moving upwards and a line against the cantus firmus moving in the same direction. This would be parallel motion. I say pros and cons because there's good and bad to all types of melodic motion. For example, we've all heard melodies where you double the third, right? Or a melody with parallel thirds or parallel sixths, which can be incredibly beautiful, very useful tool. But with this music, we really have to write sensibly. So if we're doing parallel thirds, I mean, for example, I'll do 2 or 3 times in a row, but then 4 could be redundant and the music becomes boring. So we have to sort of write smart. Within these rules, we're still learning how to construct really strong, solid melodic lines that are interesting. Contrary motion is what it sounds like. It's when one line's moving in one direction, the other line moving in the other direction. Contrary motion, also very useful, but there are pros and cons as well. Oblique melodic motion is when one line is staying the same. For example, in third species, you're going to have 4 notes against one note in the cantus firmus. So if the note is being held in the cantus firmus and the other line's moving in one direction while one line stays the same, this is oblique melodic motion. Polyphony stresses the importance of each individual line, helping students construct strong melodic lines. Now, this is polyphony. We have to understand exactly what that means. Take the word poly and phony. Poly meaning many and phony meaning sound. So we have many sounds and they're put together, but they are their own individual line. And that's how, as a composer, one should think that these lines should be beautiful on their own. That while we want them to work in the greater context of the polyphonic piece, that each melodic line has its own beauty and should be able to stand alone. So that poses more stress on the composer to really think about each individual melodic line, also thinking about the greater context of the larger piece. Now, there are 5 different species of counterpoint. First species, note against note, right? That we have whole notes in the cantus firmus and we're writing whole notes against it. This is going to be all consonant intervals, but there's still rules. I mean, no parallel fifths, for example, no parallel octaves. So we'll see how that works as we move on. Second species is 2 notes against each note of the cantus firmus, or fixed melodic line, right? Wherever that is. Students are introduced to the use of dissonance. So here, we're going to see dissonance on the offbeat. We're going to have half notes for our counterpoint lines and for our counterpoint, and the cantus firmus is still going to have the whole notes. So the offbeats, we're going to have the chance to use dissonance, introduce dissonance. And again, we're going to look at approaching dissonance as well as resolving dissonance. Very important. Now, third species is 4 notes against each note of the cantus firmus. So we have 4 quarters against each whole note in the cantus firmus, and it's a more advanced use of dissonance, right? More offbeats, more chance to experiment with approaching dissonance and resolving dissonance. Now, fourth species, syncopation is introduced. Syncopation, this is my favorite species, I must say, fourth species. I say students learn the rules of dealing with both consonants and dissonance within syncopation. And I say it's my favorite because, well, if you put syncopation to almost anything, you're going to give music a bit of swing, right? And this is ancient music that we're writing. We're writing in a style and a technique that was used during the Renaissance. So it's kind of cool that we're able to add some swing to Renaissance music. Now, you will be used more advanced, the use of dissonance within syncopation, because here you're going to have dissonance on downbeats resolving on offbeats. Now, fifth species is a combination of all species listed above. And I say the closest to free composition this course will offer. Because here, while we're still bound by the strict set of rules, and we have our cantus firmus, which is our fixed melody, that it's then you're given at least the freedom as the composers to move about the species as you wish. Start with second, move to third, first, whatever you want, or whatever is dictated, let's say, by an instructor. Okay, so I'm glad that you all were able to attend this very mini webinar. I thank you so much for attending my 6-minute mini webinar. And for more information, please contact me at celloband@yahoo.com or visit my website at www.cellobandstudios.com. I'm going to be giving classes, mini master classes for composers on a low-cost subscription basis through Composition Online. Again, please do send me an email and we can speak individually about certain needs that you might have. Thanks again, and I'm signing out.